I'm Ken Shigley, President of the State Bar of Georgia. I'm here with Tom Bowler, who's a longtime legislative representative of the State Bar. And we're starting something new this year with a video update to bar members about what's going on with the bar's issues in the General Assembly. We hope this works out and is helpful. One of the issues that will be of great importance in the General Assembly this year is sentencing reform, criminal justice reform. A year ago, when Governor Deal took office, he and Chief Justice Hunstein, Speaker Ralston, and Lieutenant Governor Cagle came out together to support a proposal to create a special counsel on criminal justice reform in Georgia. Right now, Georgia has about 1 out of 70 of its population incarcerated. About 1 out of 13 of the Georgia population are under some form of correctional supervision. We have one of the highest rates of incarceration in the world and certainly in the nation. At a cost, or just for incarceration in the state prisons, of about $1.1 billion with a B per year. That's a big cost, and the numbers keep growing year after year. One of the objectives of this Criminal Justice Reform Council has been to come up with ways to bend down that curve in the growth of the prison population and the cost to taxpayers, and begin to turn some of those tax burdens into taxpayers. As a former prosecutor, I know that my experience a long time ago is consistent with what I hear from prosecutors and judges today, that about 85% of the people going through the system are there primarily because of alcohol and drug abuse or mental illness, or as we said when I was a prosecutor, drunk, stoned, or stupid. And then the other 15%, excuse me, are there primarily because they're really mean and evil and dangerous. The prison system and the cost of maintaining the prison system and incarceration should be focused primarily, we think, upon those that really need to be locked up to protect the rest of us, and some of those who are more dangerous to themselves than to anybody else can be dealt with in some other ways. Some of the conclusions of the Special Counsel on Criminal Justice Reform to which Governor Deal appointed me, along with a lot of legislators and judges, and Chief Justice Hunstein served on as well, were first of all to increase the emphasis on accountability courts, drug, DUI, veterans courts, etc., and to focus resources on changing habits and behavior patterns of people who were there primarily because of substance abuse, and begin to get them into more productive ways of living. There's also emphasis on recalibrating the definition of some offenses. There's emphasis on things like probation detention centers to have shorter but more intense periods of incarceration, coordinated with some resources to get people ready to become more productive citizens. There may be some look at safety valves to vary from mandatory minimum sentences that were enacted back in the 90s, where there can be more discretion to vary from those mandatory minimums. That remains controversial, but I expect there will be some look at that, at least on some offenses. It's not going to be simple. The governor's office is taking the lead on drafting the legislation, along with help from the Pew Center for the States, which has worked on similar projects in states as varied as Texas and South Carolina and Alabama and others. The Bar Committee on Criminal Justice Reform, chaired by Cobb County District Attorney Pat Head, and including about 40% prosecutors, and the balance divided between judges and private lawyers, many of whom are former prosecutors, has the subject matter expertise to be extremely valuable in that process, and will be very much involved in the drafting of legislation. Once it is introduced, then we'll have an opportunity for the bar to formally endorse that and assist the governor and legislators moving forward. Now, Tom is going to talk about some of the other issues that are on our platter during this legislative session.
Thanks, Ken. The legislature convened last Monday, and as most of you all know, it runs for 40 days. Some say 40 days and 80 nights, but runs for 40 days. We've had 5 of those days pass, and in the coming weeks we'll be talking with you about a variety of issues, including the Criminal Justice Reform Commission activities that Ken has described. But there are also other major issues that the State Bar has been involved in, and other issues of interest to lawyers across the state. One of the key issues that the Bar is always involved in, and it's critical to the state's handling of their constitutional responsibilities, is providing funding for indigent defense. Governor Nathan Deal has proposed in his budget for fiscal year 2013 some $40 million for indigent defense this year. That is the largest appropriation proposed by any governor, and we hope that is the final figure or close to the final figure for indigent defense funding for this year. We'll track that through the legislative process. Other issues, funding issues, involve funding legal services for victims of domestic violence, funding of the Georgia Appellate Resource Center, funding for the Institute for Continuing Judicial Education. Additionally, we'll be working with the Attorney General's Office, who is proposing revision to the open meetings law, and we'll also be proposing legislation to update and improve the International Commercial Arbitration Act in Georgia so that Georgia will be a more attractive state for commercial arbitrations. Additionally, over the last 3 or 4 years, there has been a comprehensive revision taking place of the Juvenile Code. And while a number of the controversial aspects of that legislation have been resolved, there are still some funding issues that remain, and we'll be tracking that legislation and trying to keep you informed of the status of that legislation over the course of the next several weeks. Finally, I would hope that you would go to the Georgia Bar website that will be posted at the end of this webcast and track all of the legislation that the State Bar has proposed. All the legislation that is of interest to lawyers will be on that website and provide you links to that legislation. It also provides you links to your legislator and ways to find out who your legislator is if you do not know. And you can also access live sessions of the General Assembly and live sessions of various committee meetings. And certainly if you have questions about any of those issues, don't hesitate to contact me at my email address that will also be posted at the end of this webcast. And don't hesitate to ask any questions, send me an email, and if there are certain issues that you'd like to discuss or see discussed on this webcast in the future, please let us know.